Have you ever experienced that strange moment when everything suddenly clicks into place? That inexplicable sensation when your body tingles with recognition, your mind clears, and for just a fleeting second, you feel completely aligned with something larger? Most people dismiss this as coincidence, a random neural firing, a quirk of consciousness with no deeper meaning. But what if I told you that this sensation, this feeling, is actually the most significant signal your consciousness will ever receive? What if this feeling is quantum resonance? And what if understanding it could completely transform how reality responds to your very existence? You've been told your entire life that reality is fixed, objective, separate from you. You've been conditioned to believe that you're merely an observer in a predetermined world, that your consciousness is just a passive witness to what unfolds around you, a spectator rather than a creator. But here's what no one tells you. This entire premise is fundamentally flawed. The truth? Reality isn't happening to you. Reality is responding to you. And when you feel that distinct resonance, that alignment, that recognition, you've momentarily glimpsed the mechanism behind how consciousness shapes existence itself. This isn't wishful thinking. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is where quantum science and consciousness converge in the most profound way possible. The feeling of quantum resonance is your system's recognition that you've aligned with the underlying field that generates physical reality. It's the sensation of your conscious awareness synchronizing with the quantum field that underlies all material existence. Let that land for a moment. The strange tingling, the sudden clarity, the inexplicable knowing. These aren't random neural firings. They're your consciousness recognizing itself in the fabric of reality. But here's the problem. Most people experience these moments and do absolutely nothing with them. They feel the resonance and then immediately dismiss it, returning to the illusion of separation, the belief in limitation, the acceptance of reality as fixed and unchangeable. What if instead of dismissing these moments, you learn to recognize them? What if instead of ignoring them, you amplified them? What if these fleeting sensations of resonance are actually doorways to an entirely different way of existing? This is where everything changes. The quantum field responds not to what you want, not to what you think you want, not even to what you believe is possible. It responds to the frequency at which your consciousness is operating. When you feel that resonance, you're experiencing a moment of frequency alignment with what quantum physicists call coherence, a state where the waves of possibility collapse into manifestation through the observer effect. You are always the observer. You are always collapsing waves of possibility into your experience. But in moments of quantum resonance, you're doing so from a state of alignment rather than resistance, from coherence rather than dissonance. Let me explain. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold creates a specific energetic signature. This signature, this frequency, determines which potential realities from the quantum field will materialize in your experience. This isn't metaphor. This is the literal mechanism by which consciousness creates reality. When you feel that unmistakable resonance, your entire system is signaling that you've aligned with a frequency that matches what you truly desire to experience. Not what your conditioned mind thinks you want. Not what your ego believes you should want. But what your highest consciousness knows is aligned with your true nature. This is why these moments feel so significant. Because they are. They're glimpses of your consciousness operating at its natural, unfettered frequency. Think about a recent moment when something just clicked for you, when a new understanding or perspective suddenly made everything feel different. What shifted in your energy or physical sensations during that experience? Drop your insights in the comments below. Your sharing actually strengthens the field of possibility for everyone in this community. But here's what happens for most people. They feel the resonance, they recognize its significance, and then they immediately doubt it. They dismiss it. They return to the familiar frequency of limitation, separation, and fear. And in doing so, they miss the most important doorway they'll ever encounter. Consider this. What if these moments of resonance aren't just random occurrences, but actual invitations? What if they're consciousness itself, showing you exactly where to place your attention to transform your entire reality? Think about the last time you felt this resonance. Perhaps it was while having a conversation that suddenly felt deeply meaningful. Maybe it was during a moment in nature when everything seemed intensely alive and connected. Perhaps it was a random thought that gave you chills because it felt so true, so aligned. Whatever the context, in that moment, you weren't just thinking about reality, you were experiencing it differently. Your perception shifted, your awareness expanded, and the quantum field responded. This is where science and spirituality aren't just compatible, they're inseparable. Quantum physics has demonstrated conclusively that the observer affects the observed. Consciousness impacts matter. Your awareness influences how particles behave, how energy flows, how reality manifests. The feeling of resonance is your system's recognition that you've momentarily stepped into your natural role as conscious creator rather than passive observer. But here's the crucial question. What if you could live from this resonance rather than just occasionally stumbling into it? What if this feeling of alignment, this sensation of clicking into place with the larger field, could become your baseline state rather than a rare exception? This is where practice becomes essential. Not just intellectual understanding, but embodied recognition. So right now, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath and recall the last time you felt this quantum resonance. Remember the sensation in your body, the clarity in your mind, the feeling of rightness, of recognition, of alignment. As you remember this feeling, notice what happens in your body right now. Notice how even the memory of resonance can begin to create the experience of resonance in this moment. What's happening here is profound. You're not just remembering a past experience, you're actually reactivating that frequency in your nervous system, in your energy field, in your consciousness. The quantum field doesn't distinguish between what's happening now and what you're vividly remembering or imagining. It responds to the frequency you're embodying regardless of how you arrived there. This is why visualization practices can be so powerful when done correctly. Not because you're sending thoughts out into the universe, but because you're literally generating frequency patterns that the quantum field responds to as if they were happening in physical reality. But there's a crucial distinction between intellectual visualization and embodied resonance. Many people attempt to visualize desired outcomes without actually generating the frequency of already having those experiences. They're thinking about what they want rather than embodying the frequency of already having it. Resonance bypasses this limitation. When you feel that unmistakable resonance, you aren't thinking about a different reality. You're literally standing in it energetically. Your entire system is vibrating at the frequency of that reality already existing. And here's where the science becomes undeniable. Quantum physicists have demonstrated that particles exist in states of probability until observed. The famous double-slit experiment showed that electrons behave as waves of possibility until measured, at which point they collapse into specific locations. What if your consciousness is doing exactly the same thing with your entire reality? What if, until observed through the lens of your awareness, your life experiences exist as waves of probability rather than fixed events? And what if the feeling of resonance is actually the sensation of those waves collapsing into your experience in a way that aligns with your true nature, rather than with your conditioning or limitations? This isn't metaphysical speculation. It's the literal implication of quantum mechanics applied to consciousness itself. This is key. Resonance can be cultivated, it can be strengthened, it can be amplified, not through force, not through will, but through recognition and allowance. When you feel that tingling, that alignment, that knowing, pause. Breathe into it. Allow it to expand rather than contracting around it or dismissing it. Let the feeling grow, intensify, stabilize. Because here's what no one tells you. That feeling of resonance isn't just a momentary experience. It's actually the sensation of you shifting timelines. It's the feeling of your consciousness selecting a different probability from the quantum field. It's you literally changing which reality you're aligned with. Let that sink in. The sensation of quantum resonance is the feeling of reality reorganizing itself around your consciousness. But most people never stabilize in this new frequency. They touch it briefly and then return to their habitual state. They glimpse the new reality and then snap back to the familiar one. There's a neurological reason for this. Your brain has created neural pathways, literal physical structures, that correspond to your habitual frequency, your familiar reality. These pathways have been reinforced over years, sometimes decades, of consistent thought patterns, emotional responses, and beliefs. When you experience resonance, you're activating different neural networks. You're lighting up new pathways in the brain that correspond to this higher frequency. But these pathways aren't yet as developed, as myelinated, as automatic as your habitual ones. This is why maintaining resonance initially requires conscious attention. Your system will naturally default to the most established neural pathways unless you deliberately choose to strengthen the new ones. The good news? Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to create new neural connections and reorganize existing ones, means that you can literally rewire your brain to make resonance your default state rather than an occasional visitor. Every time you notice resonance and consciously amplify it rather than dismissing it, you strengthen these new neural pathways. Every time you make decisions based on resonance rather than habit, you're reinforcing this new circuitry. This isn't just psychological, it's physical. You're literally changing the structure of your brain to align with a different frequency, a different reality. But here's what makes this process even more powerful. Your brain doesn't just create your perception of reality, it creates your reality itself through the observer effect. As quantum physics has demonstrated, the act of observation collapses waves of probability into specific particles, specific locations, specific experiences. Your perception, shaped by these neural pathways, is literally selecting which reality you experience from infinite possibilities in the quantum field. So when you rewire your brain to resonate at a different frequency, you aren't just changing how you perceive reality. You're changing which reality you collapse into experience through the observer effect. What if instead, you learn to anchor in this new frequency? What if you trained your system to recognize resonance as your natural state rather than an occasional visitor? This is where transformation becomes not just possible but inevitable. Because the quantum field doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to the frequency you embody. And resonance is the feeling of embodying the frequency that aligns with your deepest desires. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase. I recognize resonance as the language of my consciousness communicating with the quantum field. This isn't just a comment. It's a declaration to the field itself. It's you signaling your recognition of how reality actually works, how consciousness actually creates, how manifestation actually happens. Now let's go deeper. There are specific sensations that accompany quantum resonance, specific signals that your system gives you when you've aligned with a reality that matches your true frequency. First, there's often a physical sensation, a tingling along your spine, a warmth in your chest, a lightness in your body. This isn't random. It's your physical system recognizing frequency alignment. Second, there's a mental clarity. Thoughts become sharper, more focused, yet paradoxically fewer. The mental chatter quiets as your mind recognizes truth rather than having to manufacture it. Third, there's an emotional response, a feeling of relief, of coming home, of rightness. Not excitement necessarily, but a deep knowing that transcends the usual emotional roller coaster. And finally, there's what can only be described as a temporal shift, a sense that time behaves differently, that you've stepped into a different relationship with the unfolding of events. When you feel these sensations simultaneously, you aren't just thinking about a new possibility. You're literally standing in it. You've stepped into a new probability in the quantum field. Let's explore what's actually happening in your system when you experience these sensations. The physical tingling or warmth is your body's electromagnetic field reorganizing itself to align with a different frequency. Your body is composed of trillions of cells, each generating its own tiny electromagnetic field. When these fields align coherently rather than chaotically, you experience this as a physical sensation of energy moving through your system. Quantum physicists call this phase coherence, when waves align so that the peak of one wave matches the peak of another, amplifying the signal rather than canceling it out. This is literally what's happening in your body during resonance. Your cells are phase locking with a coherent frequency in the quantum field. The mental clarity you experience is your brain shifting from beta waves, the fragmented, chaotic thought patterns of normal waking consciousness, into more coherent alpha or theta states. EEG studies show that these brain states are associated with heightened creativity, insight, and what's often called flow state. In these more coherent brain states, the default mode network, responsible for your sense of separate self and narrative thinking, becomes less dominant, allowing you to perceive reality more directly, without the constant filtering and interpreting that normally occurs. The emotional response, that feeling of rightness or coming home, is your limbic system recognizing alignment with your true nature. Your emotional brain isn't just registering pleasure, it's registering coherence, the absence of internal conflict that normally creates emotional turbulence. And that strange temporal shift? That's your consciousness momentarily stepping outside the linear time construct that your brain normally creates. Quantum physics has demonstrated that time isn't the fixed, linear progression we perceive it to be. It's more accurately described as a dimension that consciousness moves through selectively, collapsing specific moments into experience through observation. When you feel that temporal shift during resonance, you're experiencing a more accurate perception of reality. One where time isn't fixed, but fluid, responsive to consciousness rather than separate from it. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to make sense of this new probability using the logic of their old frequency. They try to understand the new reality using the limitations of their previous one. This creates an immediate frequency contradiction, a misalignment that pulls them right back to where they started. Instead, when you feel that resonance, the practice is to allow the new logic, the new understanding, the new perspective to reveal itself to you. To listen to the resonance rather than immediately interpreting it through your existing framework. This is harder than it sounds. Your mind wants to make sense of things immediately. Your ego wants to categorize, to compare, to control. But resonance exists in a different operating system than your conditioned mind. It speaks a different language than your logical brain. The practice is to become fluent in this language, the language of resonance itself. As you've been listening to these words, have you felt moments of resonance, moments of recognition, moments of alignment? Have you experienced that tingling, that knowing, that sense of rightness that transcends mental understanding? If you've been feeling this resonance as we explore these concepts, you're experiencing firsthand how consciousness interfaces with the quantum field. What I'm sharing today is just the surface of a much deeper understanding about how resonance works within your entire being. For those who are ready to fully master this quantum resonance process, I've created a complete system in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, A Quantum Guide to Consciousness Mastery. It explores all 9 master frequencies that govern consciousness transformation, including detailed practices for heart-brain coherence and becoming the broadcast itself, rather than just receiving it. If you're feeling called to understand the complete framework of conscious creation, you'll find it linked in the pinned comment below. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, you translate everything back into your native tongue. You hear the new language and convert it into the familiar one before you can understand it. This is slow, cumbersome, limited. But eventually, if you immerse yourself in the new language, something magical happens. You begin to think in that language. You dream in that language. You no longer translate. You directly comprehend. This is what happens as you become fluent in the language of resonance. You no longer need to translate it into conceptual understanding. You directly comprehend what it's communicating. But this fluency only develops through consistent practice, through repeated exposure, through deliberate attention. Many ancient traditions understood this process intuitively. Buddhist mindfulness practices, Taoist internal arts, Hindu yoga systems, all these approaches, at their core, are training attention to recognize and stabilize in states of coherence rather than fragmentation, alignment rather than resistance. Modern neuroscience has validated these approaches. Studies on long-term meditators show measurable differences in brain structure and function. Differences that correspond to more coherent states of consciousness, greater sensitivity to subtle shifts in awareness, increased capacity to maintain states of flow and presence. These traditions weren't just teaching philosophical concepts or moral guidelines. They were offering sophisticated technologies for rewiring consciousness itself, for developing fluency in states of resonance and coherence. And now, quantum physics is providing the scientific framework that explains why these practices work. Because consciousness directly impacts matter through the observer effect. Because reality isn't fixed, but responsive to the frequency we embody. So how do you do this? How do you not just recognize resonance, but actually live from it? The first step is simple but profound. When you feel that resonance, don't immediately try to understand it. Instead, amplify it. Breathe into it. Allow it to expand through your entire system. Imagine that feeling as a color or light spreading through your body. Feel it intensifying, stabilizing, becoming more defined rather than fading away. The second step is to remove your attention from anything that contradicts this resonance. Any thought, any emotion, any sensation that doesn't match this frequency, gently release it. Not through force, not through resistance, but through simply redirecting your attention back to the resonance itself. And the third step is perhaps the most powerful. Assume that this resonance is showing you what's actually real, what's actually true, what's actually possible, even if it contradicts everything you've previously believed or experienced. This takes tremendous courage. It requires you to trust the resonance more than you trust your existing beliefs, your past experiences, your conditioned limitations. But this is precisely where transformation happens. This is where reality shifts. This is where the quantum field responds not to what you're thinking about, but to the frequency you're embodying. Let me share something that quantum physicists discovered that completely changed our understanding of reality. In the famous delayed choice quantum eraser experiments, scientists demonstrated that the observer's decision to measure a particle's path seemingly affected the particle's behavior in the past. It's as if the future observation reached backward in time to influence what had already happened. This baffling result, confirmed in multiple studies, suggests that time isn't the linear progression we perceive it to be, and that consciousness doesn't just create reality in the present moment, but across what we experience as time itself. What if your resonance isn't just affecting your current experience, but rippling backward and forward through your timeline? What if when you feel that alignment, that coherence, you're not just changing your present reality, but reorganizing your entire temporal experience? This would explain why, when people fully embody a new frequency, they often report that their past seems to reorganize itself in their perception. Events that seemed random or meaningless suddenly appear purposeful. Challenges that seemed purely negative reveal themselves as essential growth catalysts. The narrative of their life transforms not because they're reinterpreting it intellectually, but because they're literally observing it from a different frequency, collapsing different aspects of its probability wave into their experience. This isn't just psychological reframing. It's quantum observation restructuring the very fabric of experienced reality across time. And if observation can affect particles in the past, is it so far-fetched to suggest that your resonance now is creating ripples into what you perceive as your future? That the frequency you embody today is literally selecting which probability waves collapse into your experience tomorrow, next week, next year? This is why the practice of embodying resonance is so powerful. You aren't just changing your experience moment by moment. You're reorganizing your entire timeline by shifting the frequency from which you observe reality itself. Consider for a moment, what if the feeling of resonance isn't just a pleasant sensation, but actual feedback from the universe itself? What if it's the quantum field communicating directly with your consciousness, showing you exactly where to place your attention to manifest your desires? This isn't magical thinking. It's actually how reality works at the quantum level. The observer collapses waves of probability into particles of experience. Your consciousness is continuously selecting which possibilities become your reality. Resonance is simply the feeling of selecting possibilities that align with your true nature, rather than with your conditioning, your limitations, your fears. And here's something even more profound. What if these moments of resonance aren't random at all? What if they're actually carefully orchestrated opportunities for you to step into a new reality? Think about it. These moments often seem to come out of nowhere. A random conversation, an unexpected insight, a chance encounter. Yet they carry this unmistakable feeling of significance, of alignment, of rightness. What if these aren't coincidences but coordinated events in the quantum field? What if your higher consciousness is continuously creating these opportunities for resonance, these doorways to new realities? If this content is touching something in you, if you're feeling even a hint of recognition as I speak these words, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency, this conversation, this exploration of how consciousness creates reality. Because this isn't just content to consume, it's a field to enter, a space to inhabit, a movement to join. The more of us who recognize and embody these truths, the stronger the field becomes, the more accessible these frequencies become for everyone. Now let me share something that might completely shift how you understand resonance itself. Most people think that resonance is something that happens to them, a random occurrence, a fleeting visitation. But the truth is far more empowering. Resonance isn't something that happens to you. It's something you generate. Your consciousness isn't just recognizing alignment with the quantum field. It's creating that alignment. The observer doesn't just collapse the wave function. The observer generates the possibilities in the first place. This is why your intention is so powerful. Not because you're forcing reality to conform to your wishes, but because your intention literally creates the frequency patterns that the quantum field responds to. When you set a clear intention and then feel that resonance, you aren't just recognizing something external. You're feeling your own creative power activating the field. This creative power operates through what quantum physicists call the observer effect, the demonstrated fact that the mere act of observation affects the behavior of subatomic particles. At the quantum level, particles exist as waves of probability until observed, at which point they collapse into specific locations, specific properties, specific behaviors. Your consciousness is continuously collapsing waves of probability into your experience through observation. But, and this is crucial, what you observe is determined by the frequency you embody. If you're vibrating at a frequency of lack, of separation, of fear, that's what you'll observe. Your consciousness will collapse probability waves that match this frequency. If you're vibrating at a frequency of abundance, of connection, of love, that's what you'll observe. Your consciousness will collapse different probability waves, creating an entirely different experience of reality. This isn't abstract theory. It's the literal mechanism by which consciousness creates reality moment by moment. And intention is how you direct this process consciously rather than unconsciously. Not through force, not through mental effort, but through coherent frequency alignment with what you truly desire to experience. When you set an intention and feel resonance, you're not hoping for something external to occur. You're feeling your consciousness already selecting that probability from the field. You're feeling it becoming real through your observation. This explains why genuine gratitude is so powerful in manifestation practices. Not because you're sending positive vibes to the universe, but because gratitude generates the frequency of already having what you desire. It collapses probability waves from abundance rather than lack, from fulfillment rather than yearning. But here's the critical distinction. Effective intention isn't about what you think you want. It's not about your mental list of desires. It's about the frequency you embody when you're in a state of alignment with your true nature. This is why forcing things never works. Why struggling against reality always creates more struggle. Why resistance always creates persistence of what's being resisted. Because all of these approaches create frequencies that contradict resonance. They create patterns that the quantum field can only respond to with more of the same limitation, more of the same struggle, more of the same misalignment. Resonance, by contrast, feels effortless, not because it requires no energy, but because the energy flows naturally, without resistance, without contradiction, without inner conflict. This is the state that quantum physicists call coherence, when all the waves are moving in harmony, amplifying each other rather than canceling each other out. To understand coherence more deeply, consider the difference between ordinary light and laser light. Ordinary light consists of photons vibrating at multiple frequencies in random phases. It's scattered, diffuse, relatively weak. Laser light, by contrast, consists of photons vibrating at a single frequency in phase with each other. It's focused, coherent, remarkably powerful. The difference isn't in the photons themselves, but in their coherence, their alignment, their unified direction. Your consciousness operates by the same principle. When your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and intentions are scattered in different directions, some aligned with what you desire, others contradicting it, you're generating ordinary light. Your creative power is diffuse, scattered, relatively weak. But when your entire system aligns in a single direction, when your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and intentions are all vibrating at the same frequency, all moving in the same direction, you're generating laser light. Your creative power becomes focused, coherent, remarkably powerful. This is why manifestation isn't about thinking positive thoughts while feeling negative emotions, or about affirming abundance while believing in scarcity, or about visualizing success while fearing failure. These approaches create incoherent frequencies, waves that cancel each other out rather than amplifying each other. Resonance, by contrast, is the feeling of your entire system, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, energy, aligning in a single direction, generating the coherent frequency that the quantum field can only match with experiences of the same coherence. When you feel that resonance in your body, you're experiencing coherence in your entire system. Your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, your energy, all aligned with the same frequency, all moving in the same direction, all amplifying the same possibility. And the quantum field can only respond in kind, with experiences that match this coherence, this alignment, this harmony. This is how reality transforms, not through force, not through struggle, not through making things happen, but through embodying the frequency that resonates with what you truly desire to experience. The practice, then, is to become increasingly sensitive to resonance, to recognize it more quickly, to amplify it more skillfully, to trust it more deeply, and perhaps most importantly, to align your conscious choices with it, rather than with the conditioned patterns that have created your existing reality. When you feel resonance around a particular possibility, a particular direction, a particular choice, this isn't just a pleasant feeling. It's literally the quantum field showing you where possibility is collapsing into manifestation through your consciousness. It's showing you which timeline, which reality, which dimension your consciousness is creating. And if you learn to follow this resonance, to make choices based on it rather than on fear or limitation or conditioning, your entire experience of reality will transform. Not through magical thinking, not through wishful believing, but through the literal mechanism by which consciousness creates reality at the quantum level. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Imagine you're considering a significant life change, perhaps a new career direction, a move to a new location, a shift in a key relationship. Your mind is full of pros and cons, possibilities and fears, excitement and anxiety. In this state, the quantum field can only respond with more confusion, more contradiction, more mixed results, because that's the frequency you're embodying. But then, perhaps while contemplating a particular possibility, you feel it, that unmistakable resonance, that alignment, that recognition. Your body relaxes, your mind clears, time seems to shift, and you just know. This knowing isn't intellectual, it's embodied. It's not a thought, but a recognition, a remembering of truth that transcends your conditioned limitations. Neuroscientists have identified that this type of knowing often activates different brain regions than analytical thinking. While logical reasoning primarily engages the prefrontal cortex, intuitive knowing activates the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, and other regions associated with bodily awareness and emotional integration. This suggests that intuitive knowing isn't just a different type of thinking. It's a different way of processing reality altogether, one that integrates multiple forms of intelligence rather than relying solely on rational analysis. And quantum physics provides a potential explanation for why this integrated knowing might access deeper truths than analytical thinking alone. If consciousness is interfacing directly with the quantum field, then an integrated awareness that includes bodily sensation, emotional resonance, and mental clarity might perceive patterns in the field that analytical thinking, limited to conceptual frameworks, simply cannot access. This would explain why resonance feels so trustworthy when you experience it fully, because it's literally accessing information from the quantum field directly, rather than through the limited filters of conceptual thinking. But our culture has trained us to trust only our analytical mind, to dismiss bodily sensations and emotional responses as subjective, unreliable, inferior to rational thought. We've been conditioned to believe that truth is something you figure out rather than something you recognize. This conditioning creates a profound disconnection from our natural ability to feel resonance, to recognize alignment, to know truth directly through our entire system, rather than just through our thinking mind. Not with your thinking mind, but with your entire system. You recognize the resonance not as just another thought or emotion, but as feedback from the field itself. In this moment, you have a choice. You can doubt this resonance, dismiss it, return to the mental pros and cons, the endless analysis. Or you can trust it, amplify it, allow it to guide your decision. If you choose the former, you'll likely create more of the same reality you've been experiencing. More confusion, more limitation, more struggle. But if you choose the latter, if you align your decision with the resonance rather than with your fears or conditioning, you're literally selecting a different probability from the quantum field. You're collapsing a different possibility into your experience. And here's the key. When you make decisions from resonance rather than from fear or conditioning, the quantum field doesn't just respond with the specific outcome you're focusing on. It responds with an entire reality that matches that frequency. This is why people who learn to recognize and trust resonance don't just manifest specific desires. They experience a comprehensive transformation of their entire reality. Because they're no longer creating from limitation, from separation, from fear. They're creating from alignment, from coherence, from resonance with their true nature. And the quantum field can only respond in kind, with experiences that match this frequency. Let me share a fascinating discovery from quantum physics that illustrates this principle. In quantum field theory, there's a phenomenon called vacuum fluctuations, where particles and antiparticles spontaneously appear and disappear from what was previously thought to be empty space. These fluctuations aren't random, but follow specific patterns determined by the underlying quantum field. What if your consciousness is creating similar fluctuations in your experienced reality? What if the empty space of your future is continuously fluctuating with possibilities that align with the frequency you're embodying? This would explain why people who maintain a coherent frequency of abundance consistently encounter abundant experiences, while people who embody a frequency of scarcity consistently encounter scarce experiences, even when their external circumstances appear similar. It's not that one person is luckier than the other, or that one is working harder than the other. It's that their consciousness is creating different fluctuations in the quantum field, different probabilities that collapse into their experience through observation. And resonance is the feeling of these aligned fluctuations occurring in your field, these aligned probabilities collapsing into your experience. This is why maintaining coherent frequency states is so much more powerful than specific visualization or affirmation practices. You aren't just trying to manifest a specific outcome. You're embodying a frequency that can only be matched with an entire reality that resonates with that frequency. When you're in a state of coherence, you don't need to control every detail of what manifests. You don't need to micromanage the quantum field. You simply embody the frequency of what you desire to experience, and reality reorganizes itself accordingly, often in ways far more elegant, far more aligned, far more beautiful than your thinking mind could have imagined. Now, I want to address something important. This doesn't mean that following resonance will always lead to what your conditioned mind considers positive experiences. Sometimes resonance will guide you through challenging situations, through necessary endings, through transformations that your ego resists. But what it does mean is that these experiences, even the challenging ones, will carry the unmistakable signature of rightness, of alignment, of necessary unfolding. There's a profound difference between difficult experiences that result from misalignment with your true frequency and difficult experiences that are part of your alignment with it. The former feel wrong at a fundamental level. They drain your energy. They cloud your perception. They separate you from your power. The latter, even when challenging, carry that sense of rightness, of recognition, of resonance. They enhance your clarity. They align you more deeply with your true nature. They connect you more fully with your power. This distinction is subtle but crucial. It's the difference between suffering and transformation, between struggle and evolution, between resistance and transcendence. And the only way to recognize this distinction is to become increasingly sensitive to the feeling of resonance itself. So right now, I invite you to check in with your body. What's crucial to understand about resonance is that it isn't just an abstract concept. It's a lived experience, a state of being that transforms how reality responds to your consciousness. When you feel that resonance, you aren't just intellectually processing information. You're literally standing in a new probability. Your consciousness is selecting a different reality from the quantum field. The question is, will you stabilize in this new frequency? Will you anchor your awareness in this new probability? Or will you snap back to your habitual patterns, your familiar limitations, your conditioned reality? This choice, right now, in this moment, is creating your future experience. Not through magical thinking, but through the literal mechanism by which consciousness collapses probability into experience. And here's the beautiful truth. The more you practice recognizing resonance, the more you train your system to amplify it, the more natural it becomes to live from this state rather than just occasionally visiting it. This isn't about achieving some perfect state of perpetual alignment. It's about developing the ability to recognize when you've slipped out of resonance and to return to it more quickly, more skillfully, more completely. It's about making resonance your home frequency rather than an occasional visitor. And as you do this, you'll notice something remarkable. Reality begins to respond differently to your very existence. Not because you're controlling it, not because you're forcing it, but because you're embodying a frequency that it can only match with experiences of greater alignment, greater flow, greater coherence. You'll begin to notice what some call quantum leaps, sudden, seemingly miraculous shifts in your external circumstances that align with the frequency you've been embodying internally. Opportunities that appear precisely when you need them. Resources that become available at exactly the right moment. Synchronicities that guide you toward your highest expression. These aren't random coincidences or lucky breaks. They're the natural, inevitable response of the quantum field to the coherent frequency you're embodying. Quantum physicists have documented similar phase transitions in physical systems, where a system that has been slowly building coherence suddenly reorganizes into an entirely new state, a new level of order, a new expression of possibility. Water turning to steam doesn't happen gradually. The temperature rises incrementally until a specific threshold is reached, and then the entire system reorganizes into a new state. Crystals form through a similar process. Molecules align incrementally until a critical point is reached, and then the entire structure reorganizes into a coherent crystalline form. What if your consciousness creates similar phase transitions in your reality? What if, as you consistently embody resonance, consistently align with your true frequency, you're building coherence in your field until a threshold is reached? And then your entire reality reorganizes to match this new level of coherence. This would explain why transformation often follows a pattern of incremental internal shifts, followed by sudden external reorganization. Why you might work with a particular frequency for weeks or months with little external evidence of change, and then suddenly encounter a series of coincidences that completely transform your circumstances. You weren't just changing your perception during that preparation period. You were building coherence in your field, alignment in your system, resonance in your consciousness, until the phase transition point was reached and reality reorganized accordingly. This is the true meaning of manifestation. Not getting what you think you want, but experiencing a reality that matches who you truly are. And resonance is the feeling of who you truly are, expressing through your human experience. So the next time you feel that unmistakable resonance, that tingling, that knowing, that alignment. Don't just notice it and move on. Pause. Breathe into it. Allow it to expand. And then make your next choice, your next decision, your next action from this state rather than from habit, from conditioning, from limitation. This is how you literally step into a different reality, not through wishful thinking, but through embodied frequency alignment with the quantum field. Drop one word in the comments below that captures the energy or intention you're choosing to embody as you recognize resonance in your life. This isn't just a comment. It's your energetic signature to the quantum field, your declaration of which frequency you're choosing to embody. And if this exploration of quantum resonance has touched something in you, subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent with this field we're creating together. The more of us who recognize and embody these truths, the more the world reflects this reality back to all of us. Remember, the feeling of resonance isn't just a pleasant sensation. It's literally the feeling of you changing timelines, of your consciousness selecting a different probability from the infinite possibilities of the quantum field. It's the feeling of reality transforming in response to who you truly are, rather than who you've been conditioned to believe you are. And in the end, this is the only transformation that matters. Not changing what you do, but changing who you're being as you do it. Not manifesting specific outcomes, but embodying the frequency that can only be matched with experiences of greater alignment, greater flow, greater truth. The quantum field isn't responding to what you want. It's responding to who you are being. And resonance is the feeling of being who you truly are. So feel it, trust it, amplify it, live from it. And watch as reality transforms, not through force, not through struggle, not through making things happen, but through the natural, inevitable response of the quantum field to the frequency you embody. This is quantum resonance. And once you recognize it, nothing will ever be the same again.